cool and Lexus is an oxymoron. Or is it? That's this week on Motoring 2000.
TSN's Motoring 2000 is brought to you by Quaker State Motor Oils, formulated for the vehicles you drive and the way you drive them, and Midas Car Care, the way it should be.
You're looking at the newest member of the Lexus family, the IS300. And you know, without a doubt, this company set the benchmark for reliability, quality, and luxury when it first came to North America 10 years ago. But their biggest challenge has been getting people under the age of 40 into the showroom. They keep going across the street to BMW and Audi. Well, as we'll see later on, Lexus is convinced the new IS300 will meet that challenge through both performance and design. And speaking of design, recently while checking out the PT Cruiser, we had a chance to talk with the head of design at Chrysler, Tom Gale. And he said these are the best of times for designers, no boundaries, everything goes. Well, of course, that's good news for you and I as a consumer, but you know, it's even more exciting for future designers.
This is where the process begins, right at the table. This is where I love to do my work. I love to sit behind the table and just draw.
This is our thesis project. Tony and I are working on this.
This is the moment Steve Miska and Tony Spagnola have waited for. It's the Toronto Auto Show, an opportunity to go public with their scaled concept vehicle called the Fusion. It's the result of 5 months and 600 sketches and was conceived in the Industrial Design program at Humber College in Toronto.
It's a great course. As far as industrial design goes in Canada, in my opinion, this is one of the better courses. Ken Cummings has worked for Chrysler. He designed for them in the 60s, and he came here to start an industrial design program in, I believe it was the early 70s. So he's been here ever since. He's got the experience, and his input is very important to us.
It's a crazy place. You can see a lot of activity. Students are enjoying doing renderings and car drawing. They're kind of warming up for the real world of design, industrial design in particular, but they've taken on an interest in car design, and that's what they're doing here. Most of them have a passion for design, and probably about 20% of them, mostly guys, have a passion for cars, and they really go crazy. They just want to be car designers. So this is an outlet we give for them. While they learn to render and learn to draw and learn to draw in color, they get a chance to do automobiles as well.
Did I just read? I just read.
Our challenge was to design, we wanted to bring back the nostalgia and the attitude of the muscle car of the 70s, and we wanted to make it practical to fit a family of 4. If you look at the cars that are coming out or are still out, like the Trans Am and the Mustang, they're not very practical as far as a family of 4 goes. So we wanted to create a car that would fill that void, and what we have now, the Fusion, is probably, or in our opinion, the best example of it.
What you see on the walls here are sketches and drawings of existing vehicles. Students need to go through that process so they understand what the thing looks like that exists before they can actually express their own new ideas that don't exist, that are in their head. So they're learning the rules of how light plays upon a surface of a vehicle or any product, and how it reflects back to your eye and what the thing really looks like.
It's based on the Chrysler LH platform. It was designed around, it's got the wheelbase and height, overall height of an Intrepid, and the interior package is also the size of an Intrepid.
We wanted to make sure that the car was based in reality, not just something out of our heads. You know, we wanted the shape to be futuristic, but based on today and based on it could be built if it had to be built.
I think there's a new kind of thought going on in design in general, particularly in automotive design, where the technology has enabled the fast track to occur, so that we get a lot of fresh designers getting their design straight onto the assembly line.
I do have a few job prospects right now related to cars. But as far as getting into a company, it's a little slim. There isn't a lot of car design in Canada, but it's working its way up. So basically, I'm taking whatever's coming my way, and if I can push myself into cars, then that'd be great.
I give them a lot of hope because I started off the same way. It wasn't possible. There were only so many of them, and I became a car designer and had a few vehicles on the road. So I believe if you want to do it hard enough that you can do it.
Who gets to keep the car?
That's something that hasn't been decided yet. Steve and I are roommates and still live together and probably won't be moving out for a while. So I think when it comes to that time, we'll have to decide, and maybe I'll have to arm wrestle for it or something.
You know, rollovers account for less than 4% of light truck crashes, but in those cases where they do occur, they can have serious consequences.
We're in Sundance, Utah to test the Mazda Tribute, their first sport utility vehicle for Canada. Now, this vehicle was developed as a parallel project with the Ford Escape, and as such, they share practically all of the main components: steering, brakes, suspension, chassis, you name it. But there are some differences: the look and a few details.
Tribute will be offered in both front and four-wheel drive versions, the latter being fully automatic, sending power to the rear wheels only when the front ones spin. A device called the rotary blade coupling monitors the slippage. Once detected, it is capable of sending up to 50% of the torque to the rear wheels in an effort to regain traction.
If there is a drawback with the Tribute's four-wheel drive system, it is that it's got to lose traction to gain traction. Well, that'll mean the front wheels have actually got to spin before any power is sent to the rear wheels. Now, if in an off-road situation, if you happen to lose traction at the front, the split second it takes to send it to the rear could be the split second you get stuck. For that reason, Mazda put a lock on the dash. That allows you to split the power 50-50 all the time.
Power comes from one of two engines, the same 2-litre Z-Tech that powers the Ford Focus. Now, while not bad in that car, its 130 horses is likely to be hard-pressed to deal with the larger Tribute and its four-wheel drive system. The smart consumer, however, will pick the 200 horsepower motor, the same one that propels the 2000 Taurus so nicely. It delivers the power in a smooth, linear and willing manner. Only at redline does the engine noise begin to intrude, and even then it's not an unpleasant experience. Off the line, the 200 pounds-feet of torque pulls strongly. Once up to speed, the horsepower takes over, delivering plenty of passing power. And this was at a test conducted at an altitude of over 6,000 feet. At sea level, things should be just hunky-dory.
Typically, SUVs don't meet passenger car safety regulations. However, Mazda have included side impact door beams, dual front airbags, side seat-mounted airbags as standard equipment, as well as force limiters and pre-tensioners in the front seat belts. In other words, pretty much what you expect to find in a passenger car.
Married to the base 4 is a 5-speed manual. The up-level 6 is only offered with an electronically controlled 4-speed automatic. To optimize performance, the electronic controls automatically flip between sport and normal modes, depending upon throttle usage and vehicle speed. It also uses grade logic mapping. This strategy is designed to minimize the unwanted hunting between gears on an uphill climb.
If you go with the up-level ES Tribute, you get everything: power locks, windows, mirrors, cruise control, air conditioning, a decent set of analog gauges, leather seating surfaces and a power moonroof. You also get a great 190-watt audio system that comes complete with a 6-pack CD player. The real bonus though, this vehicle is actually wider than a Ford Explorer, meaning more elbow room.
The suspension consists of McPherson struts and a stabilizer bar up front. The rear a multi-link design that incorporates a pair of lateral links and a trailing arm. The platform, which is loosely based on an enlarged 626 design, is of the monocoque variety, meaning it delivers good stiffness, both in bending and torsional. As such, it allows the suspension to minimize the jostling inflicted on the passengers by a rough or rutted road.
Utility is important, and in that regard,
Well, the Tribute's been well thought through. The rear seats are adjustable, either for comfort or to accommodate bulkier items. You can fold them down individually or together for a nice flat floor. The part that truly impresses, though, this window is actually wide enough across here to accommodate a 4-foot board. The final link is a decent set of anti-lock controlled front discs and rear drums. The pedal feel is linear, requiring the right amount of pressure to get the desired stopping distances. As has become a Mazda norm, sadly you cannot get anti-lock brakes on the DX model, and well, it's an option on the mid-range LX. The verdict on the new Mazda Tribute is very good indeed. As long as you view it as a soft roader and not an off-roader, it easily sets the new benchmark, surpassing the current champ of the compact class, the Honda CR-V.
Well, this is the Opel Speedster. This is the world premiere for this vehicle. This car is a purest driving experience. Performance orientation, 6 seconds for 0 to 100 kilometers per hour. It is 850 kilograms, so it's very lightweight. It's a pure driving experience car. It has the new L850. It's a 2.2 liter Ecotec engine, which is a GM powertrain. You'll see it in the Astra Coupe for Opel, and it's also debuting in the Speedster. 147 horsepower, it gets up to 137 miles per hour, top speeds, or 220 kilometers per hour. Well, this vehicle is the image vehicle for Opel. This is an excitement, brings the excitement into the Opel performance category, shows the dynamic driving experience and the heritage that Opel has in this area. It's very limited in terms of our production capacity. It also is very limited, basically 3 to 4 years life cycle, so it's going to be an exclusive production, and each vehicle will be numbered, so there'll be a limited edition number on each vehicle, which makes it quite a collector's item.
Our Midas tip of the week concerns cold air intake systems. In the summertime, when your vehicle's up to operating temperature, that air that's just passed through the radiator, the air in the engine compartment, can be several hundred degrees Fahrenheit. Now, most vehicles have a ducting system designed to bring cold air from ahead of the radiator to that engine's air intake system. And the engine will produce a lot more power when it's getting that cool air. And the difference could be 100 to 140 degrees Fahrenheit drop between that air ahead of the radiator and the air behind it. If you've ever driven a motorcycle or snowmobile, you know how much better those things perform when the air temperature is low. They give better, sharper performance, and your car is the same way. There's about 1 horsepower to be had for every 10 degrees Fahrenheit you can drop that air intake temperature. So make sure that that system is intact and functional. On some vehicles there's a diverter flap in the air cleaner that has to switch positions between hot and cold. Make sure that it's functional and that all that equipment is intact, not missing or damaged. That's your Midas tip of the week.
IS300 is a vehicle that we've been waiting for quite some time. Its front engine, rear drive aspects are something that most buyers in this particular segment are looking for. When Lexus first launched, we attracted a lot of people who were traditional luxury, domestic luxury car owners that were older in profile. Now with IS, we feel that we can really attract now a much younger buyer to the Lexus family. We've been looking for an entry-level model that would allow us to bring new people into Lexus, and IS300 is certainly going to offer that.
In terms of the drilled aluminum pedals, there's actually a very interesting story behind them. I got the idea from my teenage son. He's a college student, and he saved up money from his part-time job and installed an aftermarket drilled aluminum pedal into his car. Unfortunately, the attachment bolt is too long, so the pedal gets caught in the carpet before reaching a full throttle. I realized that young people were very interested in that type of pedal, and so I installed it. I decided to install it on this car. Of course, I made sure that for the IS300, the pedal can go all the way to the floor.
ES300 has been our entry-level model and a front drive configuration, and now we have something that's very, very sporty and fun to drive and an athletic sort of profile that we haven't had. So we think this is a great alternative.
Should Audi and BMW be a little worried now?
Well, I'm sure that they've known about the arrival of this car for some time, and they have their own ideas about how they're going to compete in this very competitive segment that the car will be in. And I think that they have something they could be truly concerned about.
You know, this IS300 has to have one of the coolest flight decks I have ever seen in any car, especially like the instrument panel, which of course is inspired by those popular sport watches. And you know, speaking of watches, there's one man I think I've never seen wear a watch, and that's Bill Gardner.
Well, Brad, you're right, and most mechanics don't wear rings and watches when they're working on machinery. Obviously, you don't want to get tangled or caught in a piece of moving machinery, and there's also the potential of shorting out the electrical system when you're working around the battery or the starter motor, anything that's live with the 12-volt electrical system on the car. If you short it out with that jewelry, you could get a really bad burn. But I'll tell you something, Brad, the real reason why mechanics don't wear rings and watches, they can't afford them. Anyway, on a more serious note, we've got a letter here from a viewer of ours who's got problems with the power windows on his '86 Chev Celebrity Eurosport. He says 3 out of his 4 doors are now non-functional. He can't use the power windows. He's still got one that's working. What he's looking for is a common thread or one particular part that he might be able to replace that would correct the problem on all 3 of those doors. I think that's probably highly unlikely, but there are 3 particular areas where cars with power windows seem to get their problems. So let's talk about those 3 areas. Let's have a look at those 3 common areas where you're likely to have problems. First of all, the power window switches themselves can be a problem. The contacts can get burned out. Every time you make and break the contact on that switch, there's a little arc thrown in the switch, and eventually it'll burn out the contacts. However, of all the 3 major areas where you have problems, we find this is probably the least frequent. Now, secondly, it's in frequency, we find failure of the power window motor itself. That's this little unit right here, is about the second most frequent problem with these window systems. And on late model cars, we're replacing quite a few of these motors. When you see how flimsy and Mickey Mouse this thing looks, it's a wonder they last as long as they do. There's the connection where it plugs in. You can see it's pretty frail. And it's a pretty chintzy looking little motor, just riveted together. And you can see where we've drilled out the rivets here to get it out of the vehicle in those 4 positions right there. There's the little pinion that meshes with the gear on the window regulator, and this pinion just reverses in order to drive the window up and down. The window switch flips the polarity to the motor so that it reverses. These window motors are a couple $100, and on late model cars we're changing quite a few of them. Now, the third most likely thing, and especially on a car like our viewer's car, which is 14 years old, there's a bundle of wires, quite a thick bundle of wires that pass through this door crevice, and they go through this corrugated boot that protects them right here. And every time the door opens and closes, that wiring bundle gets flexed, and sooner or later the wires will fracture in that area. And I think our viewer's car has likely got 1 or more wires that have broken in that area. That's his most likely problem on a car of that age. You know, since our viewer's car has 3 of his 4 power window motors non-functional, he could have multiple problems. I think in all likelihood he's got some broken wires in this door crevice, but he also could have a failed window motor, even a bad switcher, or any combination of those 3 as well. So it's going to be important that he checks the car out thoroughly before proceeding with the repairs. Till next week, I'm Bill Gardner for Motoring 2000.
The popularity of light trucks and sport utilities has produced a disturbing statistic. More than 1/2 the fatalities involving these vehicles were due to rollovers. Well, the Ford Motor Company thinks it has the solution.
The tethered curtain can inflate in just a fraction of a second, about the same amount of time as a conventional airbag.
It's called the Curtain Airbag. Ford plans on offering it to its SUV customers in the 2001 model year.
What we hope it to do, let's start with that, which is the most important, is to save lives by mitigating ejection through the side windows. What it does is basically there's a sensor, and when it senses the point where a vehicle cannot recover by itself in a rollover event, it sends a signal to the bags to deploy the bags. The bags cover the majority of the window opening and cushions the head, as well as acts as a barrier from moving outboard of the vehicle. Today's announcement is primarily geared for sports utility vehicles. I think you have to stay tuned for further discussion on anything else at this point.
Boy, that makes it look like you're riding in the lap of the Michelin Man. More on airbags coming up next on Kenzie's Corner. You know, with all these airbags and side curtains, why don't they just fill the car full of styrofoam peanuts and be done with it? But you know, we've had some controversy about airbags. Recently, we had a case here in Toronto where a woman was stopped at an intersection. Her car was hit from behind. It hit the car in front. The airbag deployed, and she was killed. Now, when the rescuers got to her, the seatbelt was not done up. Now, we don't know for a fact that maybe she undid it after the crash. Maybe we'll never know that. But we got some people really concerned about airbags and the risk that they pose. Well, folks, the risk they pose is exceptionally low. There's many more dangerous things out there that you should worry about. After all, your first objective behind the wheel should not be don't get killed by the airbag. It should be don't get killed at all. We've got people wanting to disable their airbags. Bad idea. We've got people sitting so far away from the wheel they can barely reach it. I even saw that advice on national television. Not this channel, I might add. Don't do it. You want to sit with your arms comfortably bent about 100 degrees angle between your elbow, so that way you can reach the wheel in an emergency. The worst thing I ever saw was a piece of video where an older woman said she always drove with her right hand in front of the steering wheel to protect herself in case the airbag went off. Well, not only is she driving with one hand, if the airbag does go off, she's eating her fist down to its elbow. So what do you do to protect yourself against the broadest range of risks? Well, number one, wear your seatbelt. Number two, don't drive impaired. Number three, sit properly behind the wheel with that proper arm position. Now, for shorter people, that's difficult to do. The pedals get to be too far away. You sit close enough to the wheel, it's jammed up against your chest. There are cars with adjustable pedals that make that a lot easier. So please, don't disable that airbag. Sit properly behind the wheel. Wear that seatbelt, because you can't predict in advance what kind of crash you're going to have. I'm Jim Kenzie.
Well, as we heard earlier, the BMW 3 Series, the Audi A4, and even the Mercedes C-Class is the market that Lexus is taking dead aim at with this new IS300. First impressions, well, as I speak, we have an embargo on, which means I can't tell you whether I like this car or not, although usually when I'm pleased with something, I'm smiling. But have no fear, because we'll get the green light in just a few weeks, and Graham will be taking the new IS300 for a spin on Test Drive. That's it for now. We'll see you next time out as we continue to bring you more stories about cars and the people who drive them.
TSN's Motoring 2000 has been brought to you by Quaker State Motor Oils, formulated for the vehicles you drive and the way you drive them, and Midas Car Care, the way it should be.